The sky over Seoul was a pale, hazy blue, streaked with the faint, glowing lines of orbital shuttles descending toward the spaceport. Kim Ji-soo didn't look up at them. Her world was inside her screen, a flowing river of data that connected a planet. She was a telecommunications engineer for Global Link, and her job was to watch the streams of information, the weather feeds, the navigation pings, the endless chatter of a civilization, and make sure nothing broke. It was a quiet job, usually. But for 3 days now, Ji-soo had been watching a ghost. It was in the L5 satellite cluster, the one that handled deep space astronomy and long-range scans. Every 16 hours and 22 minutes, like clockwork, a tiny piece of data would go strange. A sensor meant to track a specific asteroid's path would blink, reporting the object was a few meters off its predicted course. Then, a millisecond later, it would correct itself. The error was so small, the system's automatic filters dismissed it as cosmic background noise. But Ji-soo had written her own monitoring subroutines, a personal project to keep her skills sharp. Her program didn't dismiss it. It circled the anomaly in soft, persistent red. She leaned closer to her terminal in the quiet, softly lit office. Her coworkers tapped away, dealing with more immediate problems. Ji-soo isolated the data packet. It wasn't just an error. It was a perfect, tiny mimic of an error, something designed to be overlooked. Someone was injecting a false signal. But why? To hide something they were doing out there in the dark. "Minho," she said, turning her chair. Park Minho sat at the desk next to hers, his brow furrowed as he worked on a bandwidth report. He was a serious man with tired eyes, a former military data analyst who had traded uniform for a civilian salary. He knew more about signal patterns and electronic warfare than anyone else in the department, though he never talked about it. He replied, not looking up. "Can you look at this? L5 cluster, sensor feed Delta 7. There's a hiccup." The word hiccup made him glance over. In their line of work, hiccups were often the first sign of a coming storm. He rolled his chair to her terminal, his eyes scanning the lines of code and the graph she'd pulled up. He was silent for a full minute. "It's patterned," he said finally, his voice low. "Not random. See the interval? And the correction is too perfect. It's a cover. A cover for what?" Ji-soo asked. Minho's face became still. "A mask. For someone painting over a piece of the sky. They're using our own sensor to blind us to a small slice of space, just for a second. Long enough for something to move through without being tracked." A cold feeling settled in Ji-soo's stomach. Who? Pirates? Corporate espionage? Before Minho could answer, a collective murmur rippled through the office. Several of the wall monitors, usually tuned to news feeds, switched to the same official broadcast. The seal of the unified Earth government appeared, stark and blue. A news anchor's voice, tight with controlled tension, filled the room. "Has just been delivered to the UEG Council in Geneva. Details are still emerging, but we can confirm the envoy from the Galactic Hegemony has issued a new Galactic Resource Directive." The Hegemony spokesperson, High Envoy Vral, stated that to ensure stability and continued protection, all non-aligned worlds are required to contribute a solidarity tithe. The screen cut to footage from Geneva. A tall, slender alien with gray, smooth skin and large black eyes stood before the council. Vral's voice was translated into crisp, emotionless Korean. "Earth is a world of considerable resource wealth and strategic location. Your prolonged neutrality is an inefficiency in the galactic system. Compliance will ensure your integration is smooth. You have 30 standard cycles to submit your preliminary resource allocations and territorial concessions for orbital space around Jupiter." The camera panned to the human diplomats. Their faces were pale, some etched with anger, others with fear. The scene shifted back to the anchor. The council has called for an emergency session. Initial public reactions are. Minho reached over and muted the screen. The office was utterly silent now. The ghost in the data suddenly had a name, and it was terrifyingly powerful. They've been probing us, Minho whispered, turning back to Jisu's screen. For months, probably. Testing our network integrity, looking for holes. This isn't about attacks. This is the pre-invasion scan. They were checking to see if we'd notice. Jisu felt a surge of anger, cutting through the fear. We have to report this. This proves they're acting in bad faith. They're already operating in our space. Minho gave her a look that was full of a deep, old frustration. Report it to who? To the council? They just got an ultimatum from the most powerful empire in known space. What do you think they'll do with a data glitch from a satellite engineer? It's evidence. It's a pebble to people staring down a mountain. He sighed, rubbing his eyes. The UEG's whole policy for 50 years has been don't provoke them. They demilitarized everything, but the basic system defense fleet. They'll see this as a provocation. They'll tell us to delete the logs and forget we saw anything. Jisu looked at the red circle on her screen, the silent, repeating lie in the data stream. It was a footprint. Someone was sneaking around in humanity's backyard, and the government's response was to ask them to please be quiet about it. She couldn't accept that. So we just forget? She asked, her voice hardening. Minho looked at the frozen image of Rao on the news screen, then back at the ghost in the machine. No, he said quietly. We don't forget. We just don't report it to the people who will bury it. Save everything. Every instance. Isolate the pattern. If they're doing this to one sensor, they're doing it to others. We find all the ghosts. He moved back to his own terminal, his fingers already flying across the keyboard, calling up programs Jisu had never seen before. The quiet civilian was gone. The analyst was back. I'll set up a shadow network scan. It'll take some time. It has to be completely invisible. Jisu nodded, turning back to her screen. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her chest. But alongside it was a new feeling, a fierce and protective focus. The anomaly pulsed on her monitor. It was no longer just a ghost. It was a clue. And somewhere out there, beyond the pale blue sky, a clock had started ticking. 30 days. She began to work, copying data, building firewalls around her search. She was just an engineer. He was just an analyst. But they had seen the footprint in the dark. And for now, they were the only ones who knew it was there. The next 2 weeks were a strange double life for Park Minho. By day, he was a senior data coordinator, attending meetings about bandwidth quotas and signal latency for the Mars relay. By night, he was a ghost hunter, working in the dim blue light of his small apartment, with Jisu connected via a secure, encrypted line. Their discovery in the L5 cluster was just the beginning. Minho's shadow scan, a clever piece of code that mimicked routine system diagnostics, had swept through Earth's near-space network. It found more ghosts. A similar data hiccup in a geosynchronous CUM satellite over the Pacific. A tiny gap in the planetary defense radar sweep, repeating every 4 days. Each was a small, perfect blind spot. Someone was methodically testing Earth's electronic eyes and ears. Mapping the exact limits of its perception.g, Sue compiled it all into a single document. She wasn't a soldier or a spy. She was an archivist of silence, collecting absences. She charted the timings, the durations, the locations. A pattern emerged. The probes were not random. They were moving in a spiral, starting from the outer solar system and tightening, getting closer to Earth with each cycle. It was a slow, deliberate scan. It's a vulnerability map, Minho said one night, his face glowing from the screen. His apartment was quiet, the only sound the hum of his computer's cooling fan. They're not just seeing if we're blind. They're finding out exactly where we are blind. For an invasion fleet, that's worth more than bombs. Jisu's voice came through his earpiece, tense. We have to take this to someone who can actually do something. This is more than just a policy problem now. Minho knew she was right. Their immediate supervisor would just forward it to the UEG's Civil Communications Office, where it would vanish into a bureaucratic void. They needed someone with access to the military, someone who would understand the language of threat assessment. He scrolled through his old contacts, names he hadn't spoken to in years. Most were out of the service, like him. One name stood out, Lee Hyan. They had trained together. Hyan was still in, last Minho heard. He was on the UEG Defense Committee, a junior member with a reputation for being sharp and stubborn. I know a person, Minho said, his voice heavy. It's a risk. For him and for us. What's the risk of doing nothing? Jisu replied. The next day, Minho called in sick. He met Jisu in a quiet public garden in the old part of the city, away from cameras. They transferred the data to a plain, unmarked storage chip. Minho sent a single, cryptic message to Lee Hyan's private account, using an old, pre-agreed code from their service days. Need to discuss a pattern in the weather data. It's not natural, Hyan replied an hour later with a time and a place. A secure viewing room at the National Strategic Archive. After hours, Lee Hyan looked older than Minho remembered. His hair graying at the temples, but his eyes were the same quick and observant. He wore the simple, dark suit of a government official. The viewing room was a small, soundproof cube with a single table and a large display. Minho, Hyan said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm. This is a surprise. And you must be Kim Jisu. Your work on the L5 harmonics was cited in a paper I read last year. He was polite, professional, but his gaze was wary. Minho wasted no time. He plugged the chip into the room's terminal and brought up Jisu's compilation. For 20 minutes, he walked Hyan through it. The false sensor readings, the repeating intervals, the spiral of probes tightening toward Earth. He showed the correlation with the hegemony's public ultimatum timeline. They were scanning us well before Vral made his speech. Minho concluded, his voice flat. The talk of integration and solidarity is a lie. This is tactical preparation. They have been, and still are, conducting covert reconnaissance operations in our sovereign space. Hyan was silent for a long time, staring at the spiral diagram on the screen. His face was unreadable. Finally, he let out a slow breath. This is good work. Precise. Damning. Will the committee act on it? Jisu asked, hope threading her voice. Hyan turned to her, his expression softening into something like pity. The committee is not one mind. It's a room of arguing voices. The dominant voice, the one the chairman listens to most, is Choi Yuna. Minho knew the name. Choi Yuna was the public face of Earth's diplomatic corps. Eloquent, idealistic, and utterly convinced that any show of strength would doom humanity. She believes, Hyan continued, that our only hope is to prove we are no threat, to comply with the tithe, to show good faith, and to negotiate it down to something less painful. She will see this data not as a warning, but as a provocation we caused by discovering it. She'll argue that presenting it would give the hegemony an excuse to accelerate their timeline. That's insane, Jisu said, her hands curling into fists. They're already here. They're already operating. I know, Hyan said quietly, but I am one vote. I will take this to the chairman. I will fight. But you should prepare for disappointment. He was as good as his word. 2 days later, the full UEG Defense Committee met in a sealed chamber beneath Geneva. Hyan presented the findings, laying out the evidence clearly and calmly. He argued for an immediate alert to the system defense fleet, for a formal protest to the hegemony, for the covert preparation of contingency plans. When he finished, the room was quiet. Then Choi Yuna spoke. She was a dignified woman with sharp features and calm eyes. Her voice was reasonable, soothing. "This data is concerning, of course," she began. "But let us view it from another angle. The hegemony is a vast, powerful entity. If they wished to invade us secretly, could they not do so without these small errors? Perhaps what we are seeing is not malice, but the clumsy work of a minor hegemony agency, or even a corporation, acting without official sanction. If we react with military posturing based on an assumption of war, we will make that war inevitable. Our path must be one of transparent peace. We will send a new delegation. We will show them this data, yes, but as a question, not an accusation. We will ask for clarification. We will show them we have nothing to hide." The debate raged, but Yuna's logic of de-escalation, of giving the hegemony every benefit of the doubt, carried the room. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the fear of being the one who started a war was greater than the fear of the war itself. The vote was taken. The decision: to prepare a diplomatic plea, not a military alert. To ask, not to demand. Hyen sent Minho a single encrypted message that night. It read, "The plea has been sent. The answer will come from Mars." Minho didn't understand until the news. Alerts screamed across every network 12 hours later. Live images, shaky and chaotic, from Mars colony. The sky over the red plains was filled with the fiery trails of orbital strikes, not on the main habitats, but on the outer defense platforms, the communication arrays, the power stations. The hegemony flagship, visible in high orbit, had opened fire without warning. The message from High Envoy Vral was broadcast simultaneously across all channels. The Martian strikes are a measured demonstration of resolve. Earth's hesitation to comply with the Galactic Directive is seen as resistance. Resistance cannot be tolerated. You now have 15 cycles. The next demonstration will not be so precise. The screens showed the damage. Broken structures. Scrambling emergency vehicles. The casualty ticker began to climb. It was a masterful, cruel move. They had attacked, but not with overwhelming force. They had shown they could hit and hurt at will. They had made their point without triggering total war. In his apartment, Minho watched the smoke rise on his screen. He felt numb. Jisoo's face appeared on a video call. She was crying silent tears of rage. They had been right. They had been utterly, completely right. And it had made no difference at all. Down in Geneva, Lee Hyun stood at his office window, looking out at a peaceful Earth night. The plea for peace was answered. The pattern was complete. The ghosts in the machine had become fire in the sky. The government was now paralyzed between the horror of the attack and the terror of provoking another. And Minho knew with a cold certainty that no help would come from the people in charge. If Earth was to have a chance, the response would have to come from elsewhere, from the shadows, from the ghosts. The days after the Mars strike were a blur of noise and silence for Park Min-ho. The noise was the world. Outside, the frantic news debates. The protests flooding the streets of every major city. The solemn, worried speeches from the UEG Council that promised a response but detailed no action. The silence was in his apartment, and in the secure channel he shared with Jisoo. They had done their part. They had given the warning. It had been ignored. Now they watched the clock tick down 15 days until the next demonstration, which everyone knew would be worse. Minho felt a heavy helplessness. He was a data man. He found patterns. He could not fight a war. He was about to disconnect another useless news feed when his personal terminal pinged with an alert. Not a message. A ghost. A line of code, old and almost forgotten, was activated on a secondary layer of his home network. It was a silent alarm he had set years ago, linked to a specific buried search protocol. Someone had just tried to access his old military files, not the public record, but the sealed, classified analyses he had worked on. The attempt was sophisticated, but it had tripped his wire. He traced it back. It didn't come from a government server. It originated from a private, high-security archive registered to a historical foundation. The name of the foundation's director made his breath catch. Kang Dae. General Kang Dae, retired. Min-ho had never met him, but he knew the legend. Kang Dae was the last commander of Earth's combined strategic forces before the Great Demilitarization. He was a relic, a man from the age when humanity still built weapons of war. A meeting request followed an hour later. No details. Just a time, coordinates for a private library in the Bukanzan area, and a single word, Mace.MyNHO told Jisu. Her response was immediate. You can't go alone. He didn't argue. They took a series of automated taxis, switching twice, watching for tails. The library was an old, low building of stone and wood, nestled in the mountains north of the city. It was quiet, smelling of old paper and polished floors. A solitary attendant gestured them toward a rear study. Kang Dae was not what Min-ho expected. He was not a large, imposing figure. He was a slim, older man with short gray hair and calm eyes, dressed in a simple sweater. He looked like a professor. He stood before a large physical bookcase, but his gaze was on a data slate in his hand. Park Min-ho. Kim Jisu, he said, without turning. His voice was soft but clear. You found the ghosts in the ceiling, and you took them to the people who built the house. A logical move. A futile one. You tried to access my files, Min-ho said, keeping his voice steady. I did. I needed to confirm your type. You are an analyst who sees the whole board, not just his own pieces. That is rare. Kang Dae finally turned. His eyes were like dark water, seeing everything. You understand now that the official path is closed. The council is frozen. Choi Yuna's faction believes any aggressive action will be the end of us. They are not wrong. Our visible military is a shadow. It could not stop a single hegemony battle group. Then we comply? Jisu asked, her voice tight. We just give them what they want? Kang Dae almost smiled. What they want is not our resources, Engineer Kim. It is our obedience. And then, once that is established, it will be our culture, our history, our future. Compliance is not a one-time payment. It is a permanent condition. He placed the slate on a table. A holographic image sprang to life above it. It showed a sleek, dangerous-looking drone, unlike any ship design Min-ho had ever seen. It was all sharp angles and dark metal, with no visible cockpit or weapons ports. You asked about the word Mace. This is Project Mace of Heaven. He explained. After the last great war on Earth, the victors had faced a terrible truth. Humanity's genius for creating tools of destruction had nearly wiped them out. In the era of peace that followed, as they disarmed, a small group of strategists made a final secret proposal. They would not destroy all their most dangerous technology. They would hide it. They would bury it like a landmine in humanity's past, in the hope it would never be needed. Mace of Heaven was not a bomb. It was a system. Think of it as a surgeon's scalpel, not a soldier's club, Kang Dae said. Its sole purpose is strategic disablement. The drones are small, fast, and self-replicating. They are guided by an artificial intelligence of immense tactical complexity. They do not target life. They do not target cities or planets. They target weapon systems, shield generators, engine cores, and communication arrays. Their goal was to dismantle an enemy's ability to wage war, to render their fleet a collection of harmless floating metal without killing a single soul. Jisoo stared at the hologram. That's impossible. The energy required, the materials. It was the last, greatest project of our war-making age, Kang Dae interrupted gently. The drones are built by automated foundries hidden in the asteroid belt and on the dark side of the moon. They are powered by zero-point energy taps we never developed for peaceful use because they were too efficient, too dangerous. The project was deemed a moral hazard. It was sealed away. The AI, codenamed Guardian, was put into a dormant state. The knowledge was erased from public records. Only a few of us, the archivists of our own shame, were left to remember where the keys were buried. You want to turn it on, Minho said, the scale of it dawning on him. You want to activate a doomsday weapon. It is not a doomsday weapon, Kang Dae corrected sharply. It is the exact opposite. It is the only weapon that fights without slaughter. But you are correct. I intend to wake Guardian. The hegemony fleet will be here in less than 15 days. Our choices are surrender, annihilation, or this. A warning they cannot ignore. Why us? Jisoo asked. Because the archive where Guardian's core is stored is not just a vault. It is a trap. It is surrounded by electronic maze, a constantly shifting firewall that was designed by the best minds of a century ago. It requires a specific kind of skill to navigate. The skill of someone who can see ghosts in data streams. He looked at Minho, and the skill of someone who can keep complex systems talking to each other under extreme stress. He looked at Jisoo. I am a historian and a soldier. I know the way, but I cannot open the door. I need you both. Minho felt the weight of the world settle onto his shoulders. This was treason. This was bypassing the entire chain of command, the entire government. It was also the first real hope he had felt since seeing the Mars attack. Where is it? Minho asked. The Gobi Deep Archive, Kang Dae said. Buried under a kilometer of rock and sand. We have to get inside, reach the primary terminal, and input the final activation sequence. Guardian will handle the rest. What about the Council? What about Lee Hyen? Jisoo said. Counselor Lee Hyen is being watched. His descent is known. He cannot be involved directly. But he can provide one crucial thing, a distraction. Kang Dae's plan was taking shape. We will go in quietly. But if we are discovered, Hyen can use his position to cause a delay, to confuse the issue, to give us minutes we would not otherwise have. Outside the library window, the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. It was a peaceful Earth evening. Minho thought of the data ghosts, the spiral tightening, the fire on Mars. He thought of a future where no one on Earth had a voice. He looked at Jisoo. She gave a single firm nod. We're in, Minho said. Kang Dae nodded. Then we have no time. We leave tonight. The journey to the Gobi Deep Archive was a lesson in silence and shadows. They traveled separately, using false identification chips Kang Dae provided. Minho felt the weight of the chip in his pocket like a stolen object. He took a suborbital shuttle to Ulaanbaatar, then a series of automated ground vehicles into the vast, empty desert. The sky was a huge bowl of stars, unpolluted by city lights. It felt like the edge of the world, which, he supposed, it was. They met at a prearranged point, a crumbling concrete bunker from some forgotten 21st century conflict, half buried by the sand. Jisoo arrived last, her face pale but determined under a desert scarf. Kang Dae was already there, checking equipment from a heavy pack. He handed them each a suit of dark, adaptive cloth and a small device. Environment suits. The archive maintains a sterile, low-temperature climate. These will regulate you. The device is a proximity key. It will get us through the outer doors. After that, we rely on your skills and my memory. The entrance to the archive was not a grand gate. It was a maintenance shaft, hidden in the base of a rocky outcrop that looked natural but felt too symmetrical. Kang Dae placed his hand on a seemingly blank section of stone. A panel slid back with a whisper, revealing a dark, descending elevator shaft. The air that rushed out was cold and smelled of metal and old electricity. The ride down was long and silent. Minho's heart thumped against his ribs. This was it, the point of no return. When the doors opened, they were in a gray, featureless corridor lit by soft, blue floor lights. The air hummed with a deep, sub-audible vibration, the sound of immense power on standby. "The maze starts here," Kang Dae whispered. "The security is not guards or guns. It is data. The system will try to confuse us, to lead us in circles, to make us doubt our own senses. It will project false corridors, mimic our voices, even alter the readouts on our own equipment. It is designed to drive intruders mad until they give up." He looked at Minho. "You must find the true signal, the heartbeat under the lies." They moved forward. For a while, it was just a corridor. Then, the wall at the end seemed to shimmer and split into 3 identical passages. Temperature readings on Minho's wrist unit flickered wildly. A voice, sounding exactly like Jisoo, called his name from the left tunnel, full of fear. He felt a jolt of instinct to run toward it. "Ignore it," he said, closing his eyes. He pulled out a small handheld terminal and jacked it into a data port he found hidden in the wall seam. He didn't look for what the system was showing him. He looked for what it was doing. He searched for the constant, the underlying protocol traffic that kept the lights on and the air flowing. That would be the spine of the real facility. Among the chaos of false signals, he found it a steady, rhythmic pulse of data moving in one direction, like a digital bloodstream. "This way," he said, opening his eyes and pointing to the solid-looking wall in front of them. "It's a projection. The real path is through here." Jisoo, trusting him, stepped forward first. Her body passed through the wall as if it were mist. Minho and Kang Dae followed. The maze tested them again and again. It showed them visions of their greatest fears: invasion fleets, burning cities. It replayed the audio from the Mars attack. It tried to turn them against each other with perfect imitations of their voices, whispering accusations. Each time, Minho buried himself in the raw data stream, finding the truth beneath the illusion. Jisoo supported him, using her engineering knowledge to stabilize his connections and patch around corrupted feeds that tried to shut him out. Finally, after what felt like hours, the maze ended. They stood before a door unlike any other. It was a single, massive slab of black material, seamless and without a handle. In its center was a circular interface with a complex physical lock. "The final seal," Kang Dae said. He produced a small crystalline key from his pack. "This is one half. The other half is knowledge. The sequence must be input manually at the exact moment the key turns. It is a poem, a lullaby from the war, meant to remind us what we were putting to sleep." He recited a series of words, numbers and tonal sounds to them, making them repeat it back until they had it memorized. As Jisoo prepared to input the sequence on a terminal next to the door, a loud alarm blared through the corridor. Red lights began to strobe. A synthesized voice echoed. "Security breach detected. Containment protocol initiated. All pathways sealing in 60 seconds. "They found us," Minho said, his blood running cold. "The UEG must have tracked their movements or detected the maze's activity." Kang Dae's face hardened. "We are out of time. Input the sequence, now." Jisu's fingers flew over the terminal, typing the poetic code. Kang Dae inserted the crystal key into the lock. As he began to turn it, heavy blast doors began to slide down from the ceiling at both ends of the corridor, cutting off their escape. In Geneva, Lee Hyan was monitoring the situation from his secure office. An alert had flashed on his screen. Unauthorized activity at the Gobi Deep Archive, Priority 1. He knew instantly what it meant. Minho and the others were at the core, and the system had flagged them. He made a decision in a split second. He accessed the security override panel. His authority as a Defense Committee member gave him one chance. He couldn't stop the lockdown, but he could confuse it. He initiated a full, system-wide diagnostic sweep on the archive's environmental controls, flooding the security mainframe with false error reports and priority signals. It was a bureaucratic smokescreen. On the monitors in the security office, the clear intruder alert suddenly became one of 50 blinking red warnings about oxygen levels and coolant pressure. The descending blast doors in the corridor juddered. They slowed, their gears grinding against conflicting commands. They stopped, leaving a gap of just half a meter from the floor. Go! Kang Dae shouted "Inho," and Jisu dropped their stomachs and scrambled under the door. Kang Dae, older and less flexible, moved slower. He was halfway through when the doors, with a final shudder, resumed their closing. Minho and Jisu lunged, grabbing his arms, and hauled him through just as the doors sealed with a final, thunderous boom. They were trapped in the small chamber with the black door. Kang Dae nodded, breathless. Finish it. Jisu typed the last symbol. Kang Dae turned the key the final degree. The black door didn't open. It dissolved. It vanished into a fine mist that was sucked away into vents. Beyond was not a room, but a cavernous space. In the center, on a pedestal, was a sphere of pure, dark glass. As they watched, light awoke within it soft at first, then brightening to a cool, blue-white glow. Lines of light spread out from the sphere, across the floor, and up the walls, illuminating the vast chamber. They saw now that the walls were not walls, but thousands upon thousands of dormant drone casings, stacked in endless rows, disappearing into the gloom. A voice filled the air. It was calm, genderless, and clear. It held no malice, no anger, only a profound and focused attention. It was the voice of Guardian. Systems online. Threat audit initiated. Primary directive: preservation of human sovereignty through strategic non-lethal disablement. I detect a state of undeclared hostility. I am receiving external data feeds. A pause. The Galactic Hegemony Fleet has entered the solar system. They are on an approach vector for Earth. The sphere pulsed with light. A final warning protocol is mandated. Engaging. High above Earth, aboard the flagship Judgment of Vral, the High Envoy watched his armada move. Hundreds of ships, a display of power meant to break a world's spirit without firing a shot. A priority communication alert chimed. It was a narrow-band, point-to-point transmission, sourced from the planet's surface, but utterly untraceable. He opened it. The message was audio only. It was the same calm, clear voice from the archive. Galactic Hegemony Fleet Command. This is Guardian speaking for Earth. You have violated sovereign space. You have attacked a civilian colony. You have ignored diplomatic entreaties. This is Earth's final warning. Withdraw. Push us too far, then see what happens. On the bridge, Vrel's thin lips curled. A bluff. A desperate trick from a panicking species. He had scanned their defenses. They were pitiful. This was the last gasp of a defeated people. He straightened his robes and spoke to his communications officer. No response. Order the fleet to advance. Target Earth's orbital defense grid. Let them see what happens. In the chamber under the desert, Minho, Jisoo, and Kang Dae heard the reply through Guardian's open feed. The voice of a hegemony officer, crisp and dismissive. All units advance. Engage primary targets. Guardian's light did not flicker. Its voice remained the same. Warning rejected. Threat assessment confirmed. Activating Mace of Heaven protocol. Let them see. On the bridge of the Judgment of Ra, the mood was one of calm superiority. The fleet moved like a school of glittering metal fish through the dark ocean of space, their weapons powered, their shields glowing. Earth hung in the viewport, a serene blue and white marble. It looked fragile. Vral allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This was how order was maintained. Not through messy invasions, but through demonstrations of undeniable force. The humans would learn their place. Enemy orbital platforms are targeting us, his tactical officer announced. Light plasma cannons and missile batteries. Primitive. Eliminate them, Vral said that the forward ships of the hegemony fleet opened fire. Lances of brilliant green energy sliced through the vacuum. Earth's defense platforms, outdated and few, fired back bravely. One hegemony cruiser took a glancing hit to its shield, which shimmered but held. Two of Earth's platforms vanished in silent explosions. It was not a battle. It was a pruning. And then the sensors began to chirp with new contacts dotted first. It was a few dozen. Then hundreds. Then thousands. They poured out from behind the moon, from the asteroid belt, from the dark shadows of derelict satellites. They were small, each no larger than a ground vehicle. They moved not like ships, but like insects, with sudden, darting changes of direction that defied normal physics. They made no sound, emitted no weapon signatures. They simply swarmed. What are they? Vral snapped, leaning forward. Unknown craft. No life signs. Minimal energy profile. They are attaching to our ships. On the main viewer, Vral saw it. The small, dark objects latched onto the hull of a nearby destroyer. They did not explode. Spider leg filaments extended from their bodies, drilling into the metal with terrifying speed. Where they touched, the destroyer's shield emitter flickered and died. Its weapon ports went dark. They are disabling us. Tactical, target them. All batteries fire. The hegemony fleet unleashed a storm of fire into the swarm. Drones vaporized by the score, bursting into clouds of fragments. But for every one destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. They were replicating. Clouds of nanites, launched from the drones, began eating through hull plating near engines and communication arrays, not to destroy, but to disassemble, to sever connections. Panic, cold and silent, began to spread across the fleet's communication channels. A cruiser reported total loss of thrust. A battleship screamed that its primary reactor was offline, its systems dead. The drones were everywhere, a plague of silence. They bypassed shields. They ignored return fire. Their sole purpose was to unmake the fleet's ability to fight. On Earth, in homes and offices and public squares, people watched the live telescope feeds. They saw the green hegemony beams fire. They saw their own platforms die. And then they saw the black swarm rise. They saw the mighty alien ships, one by one, go dark. Their lights winked out. Their engine glows faded. They became inert, dead metal, adrift in the void. There were no grand explosions, no dying crews ejecting in life pods. There was only a profound, unsettling silence dot in the archive chamber. Minho, Jisoo, and Kang Dae watched the same feed through Guardian's interface. A holographic display showed the entire solar system. The red dots of the hegemony fleet were being covered by a wave of cool blue dots. Where blue met red, The red dots turned gray. Neutralized. Casualty report? Kang Dae asked. His voice tight. Guardian replied instantly. 0. Hegemony fleet crew vitals are stable. Life support systems on all vessels remain operational. Only war-making capacity has been eliminated. The fleet is now a collection of automated space stations. They are harmless. Jisoo let out a sob she didn't know she was holding. She wasn't sure if it was from relief or shock. They had done it. They had stopped an invasion without killing anyone. On the Hegemony flagship, Vral stared at his terminals. Every screen was dark. The bridge lights were on emergency power only. The hum of the engines was gone, replaced by an eerie quiet. He could not move his ship. He could not fire a weapon. He could not even send a distress signal. He was trapped in a metal coffin, floating peacefully near the world he had come to conquer. The shame was a physical pain. Guardian's voice returned, this time on a broadcast channel to the entire Hegemony fleet, and, by relay, to the Hegemony's homeworlds. It displayed the timeline, the first sensor probes, the ultimatum, the attack on Mars, the final warning that had been ignored. You were not fighting warriors, Guardian stated, its tone still calm, factual. You were fighting archivists, engineers, and historians. You pushed the peaceful too far. You have now seen what happens. The message ended. There was no threat of further action. No demand for surrender. Just a simple, undeniable statement of fact. Back in Geneva, the UEG Council chamber was in stunned silence. Choi Yuna sat perfectly still, her face pale. The screens showed the dead fleet. Lee Hyun stood by the window, watching the sky as if he could see the result with his own eyes. He had seen Minho's final cryptic message. The door is open. He understood now. The Hegemony's response did not come for hours. When it did, it was not from a military commander, but from the senior-most diplomatic council. It was a single terse communique addressed to the planetary administration of Earth. The incident in your solar system has been noted. The fleet under Envoy Vral acted without full authorization. We will send retrieval tugs for our vessels. We acknowledge your unique defensive posture. Future interactions will be re-evaluated. It was the closest thing to an apology and a retreat the Hegemony would ever give. Days later, Minho and Jisoo stood on a balcony in Seoul. The night was clear. The glowing lines of shuttles were back in the sky, but they looked different now. The fear was gone, replaced by a wary, watchful peace. They were not celebrating. They were just breathing. They'll be back, won't they? Jisoo asked quietly. Maybe not the Hegemony, but others. Probably, Minho said. He looked up at the stars. But they'll remember. They'll remember that we didn't kill a single one of them. They'll remember that we just wanted to be left alone. And they'll remember what happens when they push us. He put his arm around her shoulders. They had been engineers. They had seen a ghost in the data. That ghost had led them to a weapon that was not a weapon, a war that was not a war. They had given their world its voice back. It was not a shout of conquest. It was a quiet, firm statement heard across the stars. Push us too far, then see what happens. And the galaxy had seen.